Okay, and with that, we can go ahead and jump in. So I'll start with an introduction. My name is Rachel. I'm a coalition success steward at Opolis. My job is to lead our Web3 partnership initiative. So I look for different impactful projects to highlight and basically aim to encourage ecosystem growth for Opolis while empowering individuals to become their own boss and to be self-sovereign through Opolis. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here today. We host these spaces every week. And we'll be doing some spaces next week as well that I'll share. And without further ado, I'll pass the mic over to our speakers to give some introductions. We can start with Adam.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Miller. I go by the Thriller in the world of crypto. And I am a DAO enthusiast, to say the least. I would say my mission in life has become to help bring DAOs to the world. And the way I do that is I'm a co-founder of a company called MIDAO, which the short version for now is we provide legal entities. They're DAO LLCs for DAOs, and they're based in the Marshall Islands. And I'm sure we'll get into more later, but just a quick preview is, a lot of people like to say that code is law. From our perspective, code is not law until you put it into some kind of legal framework, whether it's a contract or a law or a regulation. And that's what we want to help everybody do.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Adam. And next we have JarisJames, who is working with Bankless DAO and a little bit with Lido. So Jaris, feel free to give an introduction.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Well, I started off in crypto as a full-on degen, I would say. Like before getting into crypto, I got into the Wall Street Bets community and got into GME pretty early and AMC. And then once I noticed that, after getting into Wall Street Bets, the Wall Street Bets community, then I decided I wanted to get into crypto so I could be exposed to more volatile assets. And then when I came across a Bankless video with Mark Cuban, that's when the light really went off for me. I really wanted to get involved in crypto and the Ethereum community and learn more about it and like really get involved. And I pretty much stopped trading per se. I didn't really trade as much. I more so got into the tech and understanding the community and understanding the overall ethos of crypto. Started contributing to DAOs in December 2021. The first DAO I got involved in was Bankless. That's where I established my network. And then now I'm working on as a full-time marketing consultant. And I just recently became a member of the employment commons for Opolis. And that was one of the linchpins for me to become a full-time worker in Web3 so I could receive benefits and health insurance and all that good stuff. And Opolis is definitely legitimizes your work and it puts you it keeps you in tax compliance and they got your back when it comes to setting up an LLC. It's really easy to set it up through Opolis, and then you get your S corp set up, and a lot of tax advantages with that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the kind words about Opolis, Jaris. You've also been an exceptional ambassador, hosting your own Twitter spaces like Breaking Point, and just getting the word out about this project. And I'm really happy that it allowed you to delve into the space of Web3 and make sure all of your needs are covered. So we're super happy to have you here today. And next, let's see, we'll go to Daniela next. I'm not sure if Andrew is there to do an introduction. We'll pass the mic over to Daniela.
Hello. So yes, my name is Daniela, and I think that I'm the only unaffiliated solopreneur on stage today, representing. I started my journey as a back-end software engineer, living in Toronto, Canada, and felt super isolated. Was interested in crypto and DeFi, but didn't really know many people that were actively part of the community. And on top of that, feeling super isolated in Canada in general and not enjoying the experience. So I fell down a few rabbit holes and discovered a crypto community in Portugal, in Lisbon, Portugal, and how alive and thriving it is, and that there are tons of degens and nomads living here, supporting each other and, being a collective. So I made the decision to check it out, come for 11 days, see if I liked it. And I got off a plane and went straight to a crypto event, which they have every single Friday at a co-work space called The Block. And immediately I just met all of these people that were crypto natives, Web3 natives that were building, that were artists. And all of their stories were the same. Yeah, I've been here for a month and I decided to stay, or I came for a holiday and I decided to stay. And one of the major attractions of Portugal, essentially, is that healthcare is free, crypto is recognized, they're very crypto-friendly taxes in general, and you can apply if you're American, for example, or like myself, I hold a Caribbean passport, Trinidad and Tobago. You can apply for what they call a digital nomad visa or a D7 visa. And this would allow you to essentially act and live in Portugal as a European permanent resident, and then eventually qualify for the passport for citizenship. So it was really, really attractive. And in comparison to what it was like living in Canada, where the minimum you're getting like 30% eaten out of your salary, getting less and less crypto friendly by the second, lots of other authoritarian things over there. It was a massive, massive relief. And now I've had this world blown open for me of connection, IRL connection to people in the industry. And yeah, I've been on a bit of a spaceship. I wouldn't call it a rocket ship. I'll call it more like a spaceship ever since. And so I work with an amazing ally, and we work on Crypto Taxes Portugal together. And essentially, we help crypto natives to file their taxes in Portugal, to get residency here, as well as I consult. So I consult blockchain native leaders, and I essentially work really closely with them to help them to discover their hidden talents, master themselves, sort of we sift through, that self-doubt that we all live with. No matter how educated and successful you are, we all have that little birdie on our shoulder that kind of stops us from going to the next level. And I find that when you have someone that understands you and connects to you, they can really help to kind of guide you through that experience and kind of take yourself and your team to the next level. So I also work on consultation. So that's a little spiel about me, and I'll pass the mic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniela. I was really inspired by our call the other day and just how much you just jumped into the abyss of Web3. And
Yeah, I'm
I
crazy.
can really relate to that with my own experiences, and having DAOs as kind of like a safety net to catch me when I jumped into this space was really refreshing for me. And I'll wait for Origami. So Andrew, Origami just dropped off. So we'll circle back. Andrew will probably join us again. I just want to bring attention to our attendees who are here today. At the top of this space, I actually have shared some resources to connect with all of our speakers and projects today. So if you look, it's just one tweet to keep things simple. Daniela's site is there. If you're looking for individual consultations with her, I've shared her link there. And I'm really moved by all the alignment with all of our projects and missions. Origami is joining back. So with MIDAO, for instance, like helping people to incorporate their own LLCs, I feel like there's a lot of alignment with the mission of Opolis to help people become self-sovereign and compliant in the Web3 space. Same with Daniela with her work, and Origami aiming to scale the DAO ecosystem. And Jaris, I just see as a super connector in the DAO space. So yeah, I just see a ton of alignment. And Origami, feel free to throw your hand up if you're ready to give an introduction.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Thanks for working with me on this. Yeah, I'll tell you that what got me excited about it is that I've been a lifelong entrepreneur and started companies, did interviews with startups who are successful, and then realized that startups and entrepreneurship is getting a little bit blah. And there's not enough innovation there, and it's not exciting. The thing that kind of tipped me over the edge is exemplified by an entrepreneur who left a major car company to go start another car company software for other car companies and raised over $100 million. And I said, this is not that exciting. It's basically a job. And then I discovered these DAOs where people were organizing and working together in new ways and doing bigger things than they could on their own. And Jaris helped me understand more about what's going on in groups like Bankless, where Bankless started out as a successful but fairly small podcast and publishing company, created this DAO, which had more podcasts and more publications than the founder of Bankless DAO could keep track of. Then they created Bankless Academy to teach. Then they've got Bankless Consulting. Then it's like all these different things that they're doing. And I said, I got to be a part of Origami. If this is what Origami does, which is create DAOs, I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of what Jaris is doing. I want to be a part of what other DAOs and other people are doing. And I'm excited about what I've been seeing.
Yeah, and just to give everyone a little bit of context, Andrew has really been a huge innovator in the Web3 space when it comes to hosting these Twitter spaces and bringing together different thought leaders. Like, no joke, Andrew, you've just inspired me to just like do this and really dive in and bring up impactful speakers and projects. I've just seen you do it, and you really are leading by example with your organization skills. So thank you so much for just bringing us all together and connecting so many people in the space, man.
You bet.
So next question I have for you all, this is open-ended for all the speakers today. If you could just give the TLDR, what are you working on? What's the high-level overview of your project? And what's the mission and purpose rather? We can go ahead and start with Andrew from Origami.
Thanks. We're constantly creating DAOs. One of the things that's been really exciting, I know we're not supposed to say it to keep privacy of the clients, but I'm seeing major brands that I know that I've used, that my parents have known and used, that maybe even their parents have known and used, that are now getting into the DAO space. And truthfully, I was starting to think that maybe this whole thing is just for people who are like me, who are a little bit tired of the same old thing in business, who are looking for new things and not for mainstream. But I'm seeing that the people who've dominated mainstream are getting into it. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. I think it's given me this whole new appreciation for who can be brought into the DAO ecosystem.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrew. All right, and we can move on now to Adam. If you want to talk about the TLDR, what is MIDAO working on? What's the mission and purpose? Yeah, go ahead and dive in now.
All right, so MIDAO solves a similar and complementary problem to Opolis. So people who are familiar with Opolis know that they provide, among other things, individual LLCs for freelancers. And a lot of those freelancers contribute to DAOs. What we provide is LLCs for DAOs. And the TLDR, and why I'm so excited about Opolis too, is that for any operating DAO or project ecosystem where you have freelance contributors, you really need both individual LLCs for those contributors, and you need a legal entity for your DAO. And the reason you need a legal entity for your DAO, even if you have the liability shield of the individual LLCs, is so that the DAO can do things like own property, which includes intellectual property. So its own name, its own logo, right? Let's say someone else steals your DAO's name and starts building a competitor. You want to be able to go to the government and say, hey, they shouldn't be doing this. Same if you want to own real estate or fiat money. And there's also a tax issue. So you can optimize taxes for the individuals, whether or not they're using an LLC. You can optimize taxes by having a legal entity and a tax entity for the DAO that effectively pays its own taxes or elects to do taxes however it wants. So our company today is a exclusive private sector partner of the government of the Marshall Islands, where we're collaborating with them to try to create the best legal and regulatory framework in the world, starting with DAOs, so 4 DAOs. And then next up is digital assets and Web3 projects in general.
Yeah, the work you're doing, Adam, is just so incredible to see. I think it's really necessary for people working in Web3 and for DAOs specifically to make sure that they have like everything covered, right? And they're protected down to their name. Like that's so important what you're doing. And I saw Danielle throwing up some reactions to that. So Danielle, do you have any thoughts, any feedback on MIDAO?
Yeah, I mean, I made a post about it the other day. I have not truly fallen down the DAO rabbit hole. I've kind of, hedged around and found DAOs that I felt were a bit noisy, and I didn't really get what they're really about. And in general, I think that I'm the only one on the stage that isn't really part of one. And I look forward to hearing more, because I feel like these are real life issues that we face that need to be solved. And I think that having a network like this is truly amazing. Something like, law. So my reactions are just, I'm genuinely, I'm intrigued. I'm looking forward for this to be an educational experience for me.
Yeah, well, Daniela, you're definitely in the right place if you want to get connected with DAOs. Like, no joke, just follow anyone that's speaking here today to learn more
I'm
about
all of
DAOs.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, we'll move on next to Jaris. So, Jaris, could you talk about the TLDR, what you're working on, and the high-level overview of your projects?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, I'm creating multiple marketing armies. So this idea spun up when one of my really good friends, Walshy, reached out to me and mentioned that Lido's looking for a community manager. So yeah, I've been meeting with some core members of the Lido team, and offering ways in which I can help them boost Twitter engagement and to create a presence for their community, because they do receive a decent amount of negative sentiment based on decentralization, right? But they are decentralizing now that since the Shanghai upgrade of Ethereum, and they're going to have a permissionless node operating onboarding system. So I wanted to get that message out there, so decided to create a marketing army called the Lido Task Force, in which they put out these type of messages that people probably won't see if they're not subscribed to the Lido Medium. So we're gonna be utilizing social listening, which is a method that I use to form partnerships. For other DAOs that I'm involved in, I would use social listening in order to reach people, because I found that it's much more effective to get involved in an ongoing conversation on Twitter, as opposed to just jumping in somebody's DMs and waiting for days or weeks for them to reply, if they reply at all. So yeah, just wanted to boost awareness for what's going on in Lido, and yeah, and just update people on their current upgrade. And from that, I decided to also create a similar marketing army at Bankless DAO called the BDAO Task Force, and that one is in full swing right now. And right now, we're looking to build our track record. So we're going to be pushing projects within the Bankless DAO ecosystem, get more visibility on them, boost their awareness, and use social listening in order to do so. And right now, I'm also in the process of becoming a data scientist per se. I really got into Python and web scraping, and getting access to data from Twitter in order to really get an understanding and get an edge on what's going on in Twitter in real time, and then taking that data and then using AI to also like further like add sentiment analysis to it, to like really understand what's going on in these different communities. So as I look down here, I want to give a shout out to some people that inspired this from Cult DAO, because they're like one of the most socially active DAOs in the space. So big shout outs to Cult Mander, big shout outs to Wonder, and some of my friends that's also on the Lido Task Force, like Toad. Big shouts out to you, big shouts out to Zombie Shepherd. And as I was looking down here, I see someone named Justine, that she's a cloud engineer. So shouts out to you. I'm gonna definitely need to talk to some cloud engineers soon, because I want to get access to a ton of virtual machines to split up the workload. But I really want to create my own social listening app to like bring this all together. So that's like the master plan of all this eventually.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jaris. It's really, really insightful to hear all the work you're doing. And yeah, I also heard about Justine when I spoke to Daniela. And it sounds like she's working on some really cool stuff too, and actually might fit in as a speaker for Breaking Point. I know she left her 9 to 5 and started taking the journey into entrepreneurship, so she could be a good candidate. And yeah, super grateful for the Cult family too. Welcome everybody from Cult. We're super grateful for all the support that you guys constantly bring us. So thanks for joining us today. Yeah, so the next question I have for everyone, just tying back into some freelancer questions and the landscape of freelance work in Web3. So how do you see the current landscape of freelance work in Web3 and the DAO space? And are there any unique opportunities or challenges that freelancers face in the industry compared to more traditional forms of work? And I'll leave that, yeah, whoever wants to take that one, Adam can go.
Cool. Yeah, it's an exciting question because I think with DAOs and as a result, freelancers, because DAOs mostly hire freelancers, it's the greatest opportunity and the greatest challenge that we've faced in probably a generation when it comes to technology and collaboration. And what I mean by that is, folks like Origami and others are building the technology infrastructure that makes it possible to use tokens to track membership, to do governance on chain, to manage a treasury on chain. And what that's resulted in is you can create these large, like more democratic types of organizations than what's ever been possible before. And so a lot of what we're seeing with DAOs, not that DAOs have to be democratic. Personally, I think a DAO can hire a CEO if it wants to, and you still call it democratic even, but that's a separate issue. But because these types of organizations are new, no one knows how to structure them to be successful and engaging. I mean, I shouldn't say no one knows, but we're all figuring it out together. And there's a history of things like cooperatives and other types of more democratic organizations that goes back hundreds of years, Native Americans, like all kinds of cool stuff. But no one's ever really had the problem of having these global technology-based organizations that are highly democratic. And then how do you actually go do the work efficiently? Now, the opportunity for the freelancers and anyone involved in DAOs is to figure that out. And so I think almost everyone involved in a DAO today is both someone working on that DAO's mission, and they're working on DAOs and how to make DAOs work in the first place. And so it is a double challenge and a double opportunity. And the things we learn from all of our experience working with DAOs will help create the next generation of DAOs that will have an even more effective structure and approach to getting stuff done.
I love that. I feel like that was just a perfect answer to that. Like going into all the unique opportunities and also the challenges that we face. Like, we all love DAOs on the space, but like there are some challenges we're facing. We're all still so early to this space. So it's still really emerging, right? And like still finding its footing. So does anybody else have any insight to this? Any other speakers that see any unique opportunities or challenges that freelancers face in this industry?
Yeah. So some unique opportunities that freelancers have is the fact that the DAO world is basically the free market. Like there's very little bureaucracy, very little red tape. If you have an idea, you can just get started. And like, let's say if you get involved at Bankless DAO or Opolis, you can start your own podcast, start your own Twitter Space series, and you immediately have leverage. So with that leverage, you can make connections and you know what they say, like your network is your net worth. So it's a lot that you can do with just leveraging the platform that you're given when you join a DAO and you add value to the community. Well, what I like about the DAO space, it really is it can be a positive sum game. You know, the DAO wins, you win, everybody wins in this type of situation. If you look at it like that, and if you have some hustle to you, you can really, there's not really anything, nobody really saying no to you. You could really, get started and do what it is that you want to do. It's so easy to form a business when you get involved in a DAO. Like before getting involved in a DAO, I had a lot of entrepreneurial experiences in which I pretty much was like the only person involved in running a company, and that's really tough. Like you think you could do it all by yourself in the beginning, but it becomes a lot when you're the web developer, you're the person that's processing payments, you're shipping out orders, you're designing. I probably already said it. Yeah, designing the website and everything. So that's a lot that goes into it, and then you're managing your own community in terms of your audience online. You're creating the content, but when you get involved in a DAO, you meet a lot of different people that can do that, and then you can incentivize work through governance tokens. It's a lot easier to get grant funding in the DAO space. You can obviously go through a Gitcoin round or Giveth, or you have another connection that you made just by networking. So it's just easier to get started as an entrepreneur in the DAO space in general.
I think that's huge. Definitely the barrier to entry to like work on DAOs is significantly lower, I feel, than like working in traditional business models, right? Like, first of all, I feel like the energy of people working in the space, it just feels like you're plugged into something that's so much greater than yourself, and everyone just shows up and is super passionate to work on what they're working on. And I feel like the Web3 and especially DAO space just really welcomes you with open arms. And there's a lot of people like in Bankless DAO who are willing to show you the path forward and show you how to earn and get involved and be engaged. And another thing that Jaris said that I really love is that your network is your net worth. I love that. Like in the Web3 space, like we're all just connecting each other and building these symbiotic relationships to go farther together. So I really love that, Jaris. Andrew from Origami, I'm not sure if you're there, but if you have any insight into like the world of freelancing in Web3, feel free to share. And if not, we can move on to Daniela. I know Daniela is, yeah, Andrew's in and out right now. So yeah, we can move on to Daniela.
Yeah, luckily I feel like I don't suffer from a lot of the difficulties that a lot of other people working specifically in crypto and Web3 might, because I'm in Portugal, and it's crypto friendly. So I don't really face the same challenges that a lot of people do. But I wonder, just playing devil's advocate and throwing a question out there, for anyone listening and may not know, what happens in the States when you're paid in tokens, for example, legality-wise and tax-wise, taxation-wise?
Yeah, I think Adam might be a good person to dive into this answer.
Yeah, sure. And I was just talking on a Twitter space with a tax advisor named Cameron from Darian Advisors
Yes,
the other
Cameron's
day.
awesome.
And yeah, oh yeah, that's right. He works for you guys too, right? Or works with you
Yeah.
guys. Um, so um, so he said this, and I mean, it's what I knew to be true anyways, but almost every country in the world, when you get paid in crypto, that's going to be taxed as income at the local currency value at the time you received it. So if you get, 1 ETH at that moment, you have to recognize those $1,800 or $1,700 if you're in the United States worth of income. And then if that ETH goes down to zero, you're still recognizing that income. And so a lot of DAO people and freelancers have had the issue of, let's say, getting paid in a native DAO token, and maybe they get paid $200,000 worth of that token, but they don't sell it. And then now the token goes down by like 80% because of the bear
Mm.
market, and they still owe taxes on the 100%, which means they might have to pay everything they earned just to pay their taxes. So there are risks associated with that.
Extremely valid point on that. Extremely valid point. Yeah, okay, so that makes sense. It's the same thing here. So, if you were to receive a bonus or a salary in crypto, it's recognized as if you were to receive a fiat payment. But that's a really valid point, that it's at that moment that you receive it and not, the volatile values that it is day to day. That's such a valid point.
Yeah, and that actually brings me to one of my next points here. So with Opolis, Jaris has mentioned that we help with tax compliance. So we are currently servicing the United States and certain provinces in Canada. So we help individuals to be compliant, like in the United States at least, with federal and state taxes. So if anyone's familiar with FUTA and SUTA, we basically wrap that into the W-2 and payroll cycle to ensure all of our Employment Commons members are compliant with their taxes, getting W-2s and getting pay stubs. And this is really important for solving certain pain points. Like with me, for instance, like I was looking for a place to live in California and earning in cryptocurrency. I didn't have a pay stub, I didn't have a W-2, and it was really difficult to find a place to live without having that. Like trying to show your MetaMask wallet to get an apartment, it's not going to work, right? So we really help individuals to make sure they have all these tools to make sure they're compliant and can make sure their basic human needs are met, because we're still living in a modern world where these things are needed. So that actually brings me now, I wanted to ask a question for Adam. Could you talk about the benefits of incorporating yourself as an independent business and why someone might be inclined to take this route?
Sure. So are you talking about individual LLCs or DAO LLCs or both?
We could talk about both. Yeah.
Okay. So, generally speaking, and by the way, what I'm about to say is not true 100% of the time in every situation. And that's why we always say it's not legal advice, right? Get a lawyer. But generally speaking, legal entities do a few things for either an individual or a company, or a DAO, I should say. They can protect the people involved from liability. So without any legal entities involved, pretty much everyone in the space agrees that a DAO and its contributors are treated as a general partnership, which means if someone else in that DAO does something fraudulent or hosts a party and someone falls and hurts themselves, everyone else in the DAO is 100% liable for what happened with their personal wealth. So like you could lose your house if you're a member of a DAO and the DAO, someone else in the DAO does something that you didn't even know they were doing, then you can be sued, right? And all the members, and we saw this with Uki DAO, right? The government came out and said, this was the CFTC in the United States, because there's no legal entity, we're treating this as a general partnership, and therefore we're going after the individuals involved. So legal liability is probably the biggest reason that legal entities make sense in the first place. The second thing, we call it corporate personhood. Really, that's the ability for a organization to act like a person in the eyes of the law. So in this case, if you're an individual, whether you have an LLC or not is not going to make a difference for this particular issue. But for the DAO, corporate personhood means that you can sign contracts, basically enter into contracts with other people and organizations. That could be like buying something online. It could be opening a bank account. It could be sponsoring an event. If you want to be able to sign, have an authorized person sign on behalf of that organization, it has to have a legal entity. And then again, there's few exceptions that are few and far between. The third and final thing is tax optimization. And this is where I think the individual legal entity can have some positive implications, because generally with a legal entity, you get to choose how you're treated for tax purposes. And so if you want, you can just tell the IRS, basically ignore my entity and I'll just pay taxes on it as if it was myself. But also, if you want, you can do things at the entity level. And I'm not as familiar, I'm sure the Opolis folks are, with all the different ways you can handle that. And I'm sure it's amazing having Opolis like actually preparing the filings for you, because that's complicated. From the DAO's perspective, I mean, first of all, we don't have Opolis all over the world, right? So if you want to protect members all over the world from unlimited liability, then the DAO needs a legal entity. But from a tax perspective too, again, the default treatment for a DAO is a general partnership, which means it's a pass-through entity for tax purposes, such that every member of the DAO is responsible for their portion of taxes on the DAO's earnings, whether or not that person saw any, like 1 penny or one whatever from the DAO. So just to make it really concrete, I'll give an example. Let's say there's, just to keep it simple, there's a 10-person DAO, right? And each person has 10% of the governance tokens, and there's no legal entities involved. And that DAO makes $1 million this year. Next year, what the IRS will say, and by the way, I'm not sure if the IRS has even heard of DAOs yet. They probably have by now. A year ago, I would say maybe they hadn't. They haven't actually sued anyone yet for not doing this, but it's pretty clear that the treatment of a DAO that doesn't have a legal entity is a general partnership, which means each of those 10 people has to pay taxes on $100,000 worth of earnings, even if you never saw that money, right? The DAO could have spent it, or the DAO is keeping it. And so that's a really important reason for organizations, including DAOs, to create a legal entity so that they can also elect their tax status, or sometimes there's a default tax treatment for that type of entity, so that the DAO can basically pay its own taxes, which is usually what you're going to want, right? In most cases, you don't want the individual members of the DAO responsible for paying taxes on money they're not going to get access to. So those are the three biggest things. And I'll just repeat the titles. We call these three things. It's limited liability is what you get, so you can avoid unlimited liability. You get corporate personhood, and you get tax optimization. And I think all of those apply to a DAO. And I think a lot of those things probably also apply to the individuals themselves, partly because maybe you want to participate in a DAO that doesn't have a legal entity, right? And so now you need to look elsewhere for various protections, whether it's related to taxes or liability. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Wow, thanks, Adam. I'm over here taking notes, man. Thank you.
I was
for
too.
Awesome. I love
Thank
it.
you so much. I
Yeah.
actually am interested in like going back over this space and like maybe making some content just to continue like getting this education out there. Adam is just a wealth of knowledge for anyone on the call today who's working on a DAO, who's thinking about starting a DAO. Give Adam a follow, and he's also doing a podcast / Twitter space called Just DAO It. So definitely chat with Adam if you're interested in starting a DAO. He really knows the inner workings of how to be compliant, how to get set up with your LLC as an organization. So definitely connect with Adam. And my next question, before we move into the next points for all the speakers, Adam, I wanted to ask you, like, why Marshall Islands? Like, why was Marshall Islands selected as the base for this DAO?
That's a great question. So what's kind of cool about how we selected the Marshall Islands is we didn't actually select the Marshall Islands. My co-founder 6 years ago was recruited to do marketing for a project called the SOV cryptocurrency, which was going to be similar to a CBDC for the Marshall Islands. And that project made some headway, but eventually got shut down by the IMF and the Fed, and it just unfortunately never took off. Over the last 6 years, my co-founder and eventually I stayed in touch with the folks that we met in the Marshall Islands, senators from the Marshall Islands, government officials, executive branch, administrative branch. And occasionally we'd say, hey, like, here's another idea for a cool thing we could do related to Web3. We kind of looked at it as, look, this is a sovereign nation. There's only so many of them in the world. And those are the only entities, sovereign nations, that can create new legal and regulatory frameworks that you can fall under. So finally, it was about 2 years ago that I was consulting for my co-founder's DAO, and we needed a legal entity because one of the ecosystem funds, it was Moonbeam, wanted to give us $1 million grant, but would not give it until we had a legal entity because they needed someone to sign the contract on behalf of the DAO. And so we had to get a legal entity. We looked around the world, didn't see any good options. And that's what gave us the idea as we were talking to the senator and our friends in the Marshall Islands. Hey, why don't we try to pass some legislation that creates a better legal entity for DAOs? So it kind of just happened naturally, but I think the Marshall Islands, similar to Cayman Islands and the British Virgin Islands, which people have probably heard of in terms of the work that they do with legal entities and some crypto organizations basing themselves there. What's nice about a small island nation is that it's small. For example, the Marshall Islands has 60,000 people. And so it's easier for the government to be nimble and therefore innovate more. And so that's what makes it easier to, influence the laws of a country, or I should just say, help draft and collaborate on laws with a country, is that they're much smaller, and yet still sovereign. The United States and Marshall Islands each have one seat at the United Nations. And so what's amazing when you get to know a country like the Marshall Islands is they are such a global nation because they get a seat at the table everywhere. The IMF, the World Bank, right, all these international organizations and governments. And so, anyways, that's what makes it a great place for new legislation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. Seriously, learned so much every time you speak. And I see Daniela has her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I've also heard that Palau is doing similar things. I met someone at the end of NFC non-fungible conference last year in Lisbon, and he reached out to he reached out to the prime minister on LinkedIn, and he responded. Um And he told him, yeah, like I'm crypto native and we would really like to do some business. And he's like, hey, come on over, like fly over to Palau and see if you like it. And he gave him honorary citizenship. They're super progressive and looking to sort of, pioneer in certain things. And I think that's incredibly cool.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't hear actually if this is who you were talking about, but Balaji Srinivasan had the president of Palau on, or prime minister on his
Yeah, I saw
podcast.
that on his
Yeah,
pod.
so
Yeah. I saw that. Separate though. Separate. Yeah, I did not meet Balaji. I wish I met him.
mhm.
But I just happened to be at a dinner table after the event and was sitting opposite this guy who was working on, connecting Web3 and sort of onboarding Web2 companies into Web3 and many, many other things that, like beyond my understanding, like mining sapphires ethically and all kinds of crazy stuff. And that was one of the things that he mentioned. And yeah, they're really progressive and also it sounds like offering similar things to Marshall Islands.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just expand on what makes these what's happening with these smaller sovereign nations so cool beyond just DAOs and even beyond Web3. There's a book written in 1999 called The Sovereign Individual, and it was formed the basis for a lot of Balaji Srinivasan's ideas in his free book called The Network State, that's about a year old. And the idea, goes something like this: as businesses and eventually people don't care as much where they are physically located, it increases the degree to which sovereign nations can compete for your either citizenship, residency, or domiciling your business. So I think it's easy to think about with businesses, right? If a DAO or any organization is global from the start, of course you should look all over the world and find the best legal entity and the best legal framework for your DAO. There's no reason you would, by default, put it in the United States or the UK or something like that. But increasingly for people too, we hear about people moving to Puerto Rico because of favorable taxes. There are several economic zones in the world that have been created as kind of like little independent nations people can live in with their own laws and their own rules. And with virtual reality and increasingly, as more and more people don't necessarily care that they have to live in California. Like I have to live in California. I have family here. It's just my whole life. It's like California's been in my blood. It's just hard for me to imagine leaving, but increasingly people will be willing to shop around for where in the world has the best laws and regulations. That forces all of these countries to compete in something like a free market over providing the best legal and regulatory frameworks in the world for individuals and for businesses.
Yeah, amazing. And that's what Portugal has kind of entered the game to do. Unfortunately, they're not as agile, and they're full of, really old school lawyers and professionals that just mentally don't get it and the way that they work and the way that they, it's just unfortunately not very digital and agile. But the government sees the value and they've been trying to sort of do it, but it's very much still the wild wild west. And it's a beautiful thing because I think that that's not a bad thing. That means there's lots of molding that can be done with the right people and the right connections, which is what I've been working on building. But it's definitely not as easy to kind of get in to the DNA with Portugal versus somewhere like Pacific Islands, because you have the EU that's sort of hovering above and then United States that's hovering above them, so that's the only thing. But the network state in general is something that I'm looking into, and I think that that's a next step for individuals like ourselves.
Awesome. And anybody on the space looking to learn more about this topic, I actually just shared the link on Amazon to the book Adam was referring to, The Sovereign Individual. I'm actually adding this to my reading list, and I've been setting more personal goals to read more on this topic. I'm actually reading a book right now called The Decision Making Employee and How to Succeed in a Decentralized Organization. So definitely, if you're looking to learn more on these topics, definitely I encourage you to pick up some literature and read more on these topics. Now, I want to make sure we get a chance to talk with all of our speakers today. So my next question, I'll pass the mic over to Jaris. I'm curious, Jaris, how you see the role of DAOs evolving in the future and how you think independent workers and freelancers will fit into that evolution.
Well, DAOs are gonna evolve in the future, especially in the sense of getting a legal wrapper. Like what the Thriller, what he was explaining. That's really important for DAOs to differentiate themselves from the from all the members. and add that layer of protection and tax compliance. And then I see Opolis growing really big with this as well, because as another point that I would like to add that the Thriller made was, you don't want to be attached to your DAO if your DAO made $1 million in profit and you had nothing, like you didn't actually receive any of that, so, or a great portion of that. So you don't want to be liable for that. So getting your, but you definitely want to get some type of protection, some type of business entity to separate, you know, your business income and your personal income. That's going to be really important. But in terms of innovation in a DAO space, that's only going to grow. If you pay attention to Deep DAO, a lot of money been flowing into DAOs recently. So I'm very bullish on DAOs overall. And it's going to onboard a lot of entrepreneurs when they realize how easy it is to start their own business, how easy it is to access talent in the DAO space. Then you will see people migrating from places like Upwork or Fiverr into the DAO space, especially when people really catch on to it.
Awesome. Yeah. And we're hoping to make that plunge into the traditional world of Web 2 entrepreneurship and business owners as well. Opolis is not only for DAOists and Web 3 workers, this is for anyone who's working independently, anyone that's an independent contractor, indie worker, or solo entrepreneur. So we're really trying to break into that vertical as well. And yeah, so next thing I wanted to mention was just a little bit about Opolis. I actually shared my link tree. If anyone on the call is looking to join Opolis or to partner with us, please connect with me there. My calendar's there if you want to schedule some time with me. I'm open to looking into projects that have an immediate onboarding need help with compliance, getting their workers set up with benefits, anything of that nature. Hit me up and let's collaborate. So my next question I wanted to ask is, in what ways do you see your projects working with Opolis to build a future of work that empowers individuals to have ownership of their employment? And we could start with Adam for this question.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, I think Opolis is doing more than just providing these legal entities for individuals, right? When you're a person who wants to do freelance work, whether you're, I mean, the common thing to say is like an Uber driver, right? But I think we're really talking about professionals, and there's even some minimum, you know, salary to make, you know, some of these entities work. But you know, handling everything from like your health insurance to your taxes to other filings, like all of that is so valuable. And so while MIDAO, our company, is focused mostly on the DAO and what it can do collectively to protect itself and its members, we're not really thinking about each individual contributor as our primary concern as a business. We're really thinking about the DAO. So you need someone like Opolis who's really taking that individual contributor and doing everything that's needed to allow them to succeed as a freelancer.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Adam, for sharing all that. And I'm really excited to work more with MIDAO in the future. I know we have an upcoming space scheduled for Just DAO It in the coming weeks. So I'm really excited to work more with MIDAO on helping individuals and organizations become self-sovereign and compliant. Now, next, Jaris. So I'm curious in what ways you see your projects and what you're working on, working in conjunction with Opolis to empower individuals to have ownership of their employment.
Well, hopefully what I'm doing is it would generate enough revenue for the BDAO task force members so that they can become, so they can set up an LLC that elects S Corp. I know that determines on what state that they live in so that they can fall, you know, into those guidelines. That's how I see it impacting Opolis directly. But also there could be a partnership formed there where we do a social listening marketing campaign for Opolis as well. I could see that generating more awareness for Opolis overall. And when I finally get to the point of creating a social listening platform that will also help the ambassador team over at Opolis to have a more strategic marketing plan, because you'll see like real time data of everything that's going on in the DAO space. It would be like Lunar Crush in a sense, but instead of focusing on traders, it would be focusing on, it would be a service for marketers in Web3, biz devs, you know, people within that, in that sector of Web3, as opposed to traders.
Awesome. And I'm really excited to see like how we can implement this social listening tools that you've been working on, Jaris. Like for those of you that don't know, Jaris has been working on some really awesome social listening tools and using data scraping to help projects like Opolis. So in the future, we're actually looking to publish a blog that's a really comprehensive guide for anyone looking to get involved in the DAO ecosystem. And for people like Daniela who are joining these spaces who want to learn more, we just want to put everything all in one place. Like, here's all the terms, here's the terminology you need to know, here's the most socially active DAOs, here's who's making an impact, here's who's talking. So I'm really excited to work more with Jaris on this in the future and provide a guide for everyone on DAOs. And we are getting to the end of the hour here, so I want to get through this question for our last couple of speakers and then open it up for any attendees that have any questions. I see Zombie came up on the stage, so yeah, we'll pass the mic over to Daniela to just talk about in what ways you envision your project or your individual brand working with Opolis.
Yeah, well, like we said on the call the other day, I would really love to see if I can help to facilitate Opolis expanding into Portugal. I feel like it's a really natural progression. Like I said, we have a really alive and well crypto community, Web3 community. We've got tons of digital nomads that are living here to take advantage of the taxes. So we actually have something called an NHR regime, which is a non-habitual tax regime. And you, depending on what your field is, you can qualify for 0% or 20% income tax, and that is also on crypto. So that's the reason that there's like a sort of magnet in Lisbon and in Portugal for the crypto community. And then because of the war in Ukraine, we've had tons of amazing talent relocate their offices to Portugal, to Lisbon. So we've got lots of talent. You know about Nair Protocol being here. Rarible just moved their offices here. I mean, it's a tidal wave. So I feel like it's an amazing market of the right people that I think that would be great to help facilitate that. As I said, work with Crypto Taxes Portugal, who is essentially, it's a two-person company, myself and my dear friend Thomas. Um, and I'd like to see how we can set up some talks, also with an amazing like crypto native lawyer, and see how we can expand Opolis to Portugal.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for that. And just a little alpha that is on the radar of our executive team. It's something I've brought to them. So we are in talks to see if this is possible. So yeah, Daniela, in the coming weeks, we should be able to explore that further.
Amazing.
Now, to wrap up, we are getting to the end of the hour here. I do want to hear from Origami. Andrew, if you're available, on what ways you see your project working with Opolis and helping to empower individuals.
Well, we've been to DAOs, not just DAO creators. Many of our DAO creators have been in the space for a long time, and so they are creating something based on what they've experienced and what they want to see in the world. But they're recruiting people who are brand new to the space, who don't understand the tax implications, who don't understand the legal implications. And the more that we could help them by connecting them with Opolis, I think the more we could help them. And frankly, as a person who's in charge of all the content that we have written and published, I make sure to stick Opolis in wherever it's appropriate. You might have noticed that I stuck it into an interview that I published up on the site recently. Even though the guest didn't bring up Opolis, I made sure that the audience and the readers knew about it. I'm always happy to let people know how good you are.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. I was actually just DMing you. I think we should definitely grab some time in like the next week or so and just strategize how we can help each other's projects. And yeah, I'm super grateful for you, Andrew. You're just continuously helping projects to grow in the Web3 space. Thank you so much for the work you do, man. And we are getting to the end of the hour here. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So I'll pass the mic over to somebody named Zombie Shepherd who has requested the mic. What's going on, Zombie?
Actually, I must have come up here by accident, but I did want to say I did have a great time meeting the Opolis team out at ETH Denver. And my podcast co-host, ZFi, is a really big fan, so we're working to get our podcast to a level that we can actually use Opolis for our business. So, yeah, hoping to connect with y'all in the future again. So, great to meet you. And thanks, Jaris, for the shout-out.
Awesome,
No problem,
Zombie.
bro.
We'll reach out to you. I'll DM you with my Calendly so we can grab some time in the coming weeks to see how we can collaborate. Super grateful for everyone joining today. I know some of our speakers have other calls they got to jump on. So thank you everyone for joining today. And yeah, any closing thoughts, any questions, anything you want to share before we drop off today for the speakers?
I just want to say it was a pleasure to hear from all of you, and I really look forward to seeing how we can collaborate in the future.
Well, my closing thoughts, I'd similar to what I heard. I didn't catch which speaker it was, but just that most people getting involved in crypto don't necessarily think that the same rules apply in terms of like taxes and other legal issues. But in most cases, the same rules apply. There are really big edge cases, like what do you do with tokens that shouldn't be considered securities but are falling under securities rules? But in most cases, the laws are there, and there's good metaphors you can find. That's what I find a lot of lawyers do is they'll say, "Oh, actually, what you're describing with your DAO or your whatever situation is just like this other situation that happens all the time in the traditional world." So that's a big one, and I don't blame people for thinking it's different. It's still you can argue. I mean, it's absolutely true that like when you hold a token on the blockchain, that's just because there's a contract somewhere, which is basically a spreadsheet keeping track of who has how many of that token. And it's hard to make the leap from like, this is just a little bit of information sitting on the internet to this is actually business. This is actually money. These are actually assets. And conceptually, I don't think it's actually that hard for humans to do that. And most of society seems to have recognized that Bitcoin is a real thing. But even that, it's just a ledger, right? It's a totally made up ledger. So I think, same thing with DAOs, right? People join it down. It's like, oh, this is like a new thing. It's really cool, which it is. But I just think everyone should be careful when it comes to the legal and tax issues. And really awesome being here, by the way. Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining today. I want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we're going to go ahead and close out the space. Thank you all. Thank you, Jaris, Adam, Zombie, Daniela, and everyone else that joined today. And yeah, we'll see you next week.